All right, welcome everybody. Thanks so much for coming on this beautiful morning to learn more about the Canada Lynx with Dave Werntz from Conservation Northwest. I'm Tracy Sprower. I'm with Met How at Home, and we love to just coordinate and offer this kind of programming so that we can just better understand our home, since we are called Met How at Home, and keep ourselves learning and growing and thinking throughout our whole lives. So Dave, thank you so much for being here. For all those who are just joining us, welcome. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to you, Dave.
Great. Thanks a million. I'm going to just get my first slide up here. And you can let me know or confirm that you can see that. Here we go. Okay. Are we getting action? There we go. Okay. You should be seeing a little video at the beginning of this presentation. I just want to say good morning to everyone. My name is Dave Werntz. I serve as the Senior Science and Conservation Director at Conservation Northwest. We were founded in 1989. We have about 30 staff and contractors and about 20,000 members and supporters. I'm here located in Twist, Washington, but we have offices in Seattle and Spokane and other places. I want to talk to you today. I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you and share some news about lynx conservation in Washington and the partnerships that allow that to happen. Let me introduce you to C&W first for a minute. This is our mission. This is what grounds our actions. We connect, protect, and restore wildlife and habitat between the Washington coast and the BC Rockies. And we orient ourselves around these three principal objectives: protecting quality habitat, connecting those large blocks of quality habitat so animals can move. And then when we have that interconnected network of wildlands, we can focus on restoring iconic species. And this is a graphic that I think kind of illustrates that the big core areas, the best large blocks of wildlife habitat, are found on public lands here in the Cascades, in the Olympics, and in the Kettle Range and the Selkirks in northeastern Washington. So those are the core areas. And then we work to make sure there's good connections between those core areas and surrounding habitat. So here's a wildlife crossing on I-90 that we were involved in to make sure there's good connections between the North and the South Cascades. We've got programs working on connections to the Olympics, as well as between the Cascades and the Kettle Range. And then, as I mentioned, once we have that interconnected network in place, we can start focusing on the recovery of some of these area sensitive, large, iconic species. Now, one of those is lynx. And we've always been moved by lynx. And when I say moved, I mean activated. The year that Conservation Northwest formed in 1989, we were protesting lynx habitat destruction right here in Okanagan. 2 years later, we pursued federal protections for the lynx under the Endangered Species Act. And then within 10 years of our growth, of our inception, we protected about 25,000 acres of the Loomis State Forest for lynx, just north and east of here. In 2007, we convened Wild Lynx, which is a gathering of wildlife practitioners to develop conservation strategies. And in 2012, we formed the Transboundary Lynx Work Group, which we'll talk about here in a minute. Most recently, our focus has been strengthening the habitat connections between the Okanagan and the Kettle Range through a Working for Wildlife initiative, which involves wildlife crossings, but also acquisitions of land, road decommissioning, and other actions to increase the permeability of the landscape, the ability of species to move unmolested through a landscape. Now, lynx is the rarest of 3 native cats that occur in Washington. The adults are between 18 and 25 pounds, the males being a little larger and heavier than the females. And they're distinguished from bobcats, which is the other big cat you might see around, by longer legs, really long legs, especially in the rear. You see that slope in the back sometimes. Very large paws, a big facial ruff or a beard, long ear tufts, really distinct on this one, and then the tail being entirely black, the tip being entirely black. Those are the things that can help distinguish lynx from bobcats, which are also seen in our woods. Now, this is the historic range of lynx. You see, here's the state of Washington. Here you have the Okanagan population. Here's the Kettle Range, and then Pend Oreille and Selkirks. This is their habitat distribution. And here you see their habitat distribution sort of over Western North America. You see those same areas in Washington State, but that pattern of a classic archipelago of habitat islands is characteristic of lynx habitat. And lynx have evolved to function in these dynamic fire-prone landscapes as a metapopulation or a web or a network where when one population blinks out, it is colonized by dispersers from adjacent populations, really highlighting that the value of that habitat connectivity. And this really just represents the patchy distribution of boreal, subalpine, or alpine habitat, mid to high elevation habitat, roughly above 4,500 feet. This is the zone of the subalpine fir, the Engelmann spruce, lodgepole pine, places where you're going to find snowshoe hare and some red squirrels, which are important to the diet of the lynx. Now, historically, lynx were trapped in Washington, and they were trapped for decades in Northeast Washington, as you can see in this graphic. Most of that occurred in the Kettle Range. That's where a lot of the trapping was successful. However, that population failed to rebound, and the range of lynx in Washington contracted to just the Okanagan over time. And in 2016, it was listed as state endangered due to that range contraction, small populations being more vulnerable to disturbance, all the eggs in one basket, if you will, and then increasing threats of fire, and then concern about immigration from BC, possibly the lack of immigration from BC. And in order to address these threats, we pulled together, as I mentioned earlier, the Transboundary Lynx Working Group that had state, federal, provincial agencies, conservation groups, tribes, and First Nations in that transboundary area. And we identified 3 main goals to ensure lynx have a place in Washington into the future. One is looking at demographic support from southern BC, the ability of animals to move back and forth. Habitat protection and restoration in the Okanagan population, what had been our only extant population. And then number 3 was reintroduction into the Kettle Range, so distributing lynx across a broader area. I'm going to start by talking about demographic support. And what is it? Why is it important? What it is it's just periodic immigration to maintain the genetic diversity of the population. And then, as we talked about, the qualities of, or the characteristics of lynx, after a disturbance, sometimes there's a need to restore the population. And that disturbance can be a lot of different things. But demographic support is essential. What we see here is a graphic of trap lines and lynx fur harvest over a 20-year period. Down here in the lower left-hand corner is like sort of the Pasayten boundary right here. And then further east is where you see sort of the boundary with the Kettle Range. And one of those threats to demographic support is lynx harvest. Lynx are currently trapped for their fur just north of the Washington border, and trapping and hunting in BC kills potential immigrants to Washington, but also kills lynx that move north from the states. So you have a real mortality risk there, probably greater in the Okanagan population because you can see it's so much higher here than over near the Kettles. Still significant, but not quite as intense. And it may be somewhat abated by lower pelt prices for lynx when compared to bobcats. It is still an issue. One of our females moved north from the Kettles and was trapped in illegal harvest. So it is a threat to Washington's populations. The second issue is Okanagan habitat. There's really been a lot of habitat loss and fragmentation from pretty significant fire events over time. Oops, I clicked. I just wanted to highlight here, this graphic shows the Okanagan area. You see Twisp in the center and Winthrop, and these green areas are Lynx analysis units. And in the other colors show different fire activity over time. The red are fires that occurred between 85 and 2000, a 15-year period. Sort of these little patches, pretty widely distributed. In about the 2000, in the aughts, you started to see more activity, and that's in these orange, these larger patches of fire, and they're bigger and they're more broadly distributed across the landscape. And then the sort of darker color, brownish red, those are the fires from 2014 to 2018, also pretty large in size. And what you see is they're really covering a lot of that landscape. And so take another look at it maybe from a different angle. The map on the left and the right both show the same amount of fire behavior, the moderate and high severity fire on the landscape. That's a constant between these two graphics. And I want you to notice also that the lynx's habitat is pretty fragmented already. It's by its very nature, it just runs along these ridge lines in this higher elevation parts of the landscape. The thing that differs between these two graphics is the lynx detections. And so you can see on the left detections between 1990 and 2010. You have a lot of animals up here in the Loomis. This is the Loomis State Forest that we help protect sections of. And you also have a big area here in Black Pine Basin. And then on the right, you see lynx detections between 2011 and 2018. So the next sort of decade after 1990 to 2010. And what you see is that there's a real reduction in the number of detections. And you also see the populations being kind of divided and fragmented apart by these big blocks of burned landscape. Now, those burned lands, fire is a thing that does happen in lynx habitat. The thing that's of concern or of interest here is that these big fires happened over these very large areas in a relatively short amount of time. And so you start to lose that finer grain mosaic of young and old stands that lynx prefer. They like the young stands because that's where the bunnies get produced. And they like the older forest stands because that's where they can catch them. And this will grow back into great lynx habitat, but it takes 20 or 30 years before it starts to become really good foraging habitat. So there's a time sensitive aspect to this. Okay, so that's the Okanagan. Now I'm going to pay some attention to the Kettles. And why are we looking at the Kettles? Well, number one, you just saw these Okanagan populations are being affected by fire. So maybe we should think about distributing the risk to the lynx to other parts of the landscape. And providing a population that in the Kettles distributes that risk over a broader landscape. It also supports regional conservation by putting some more links between populations here in the Okanagan and those in the Rockies. So you're providing a stepping stone or increase ability for those lynx populations to interact with one another. This also shows, this also here, this illustration is the part of an analysis that Lynx biologists did that highlighted that the kettle range here, number 4, is excellent habitat. It's one of 7 areas in the lower 48 that were identified as essential for recovery. That's due to long-term persistence of lynx, connectivity of the kettles to BC, especially through this area called the Wedge, evidence of reproduction, really good quality snow, and then, of course, lots of bunnies, more than 1 per acre. And that was what made us think that this was a good possibility, but we wanted to check our homework, and we conducted a feasibility study commissioned as part of that Working for Wildlife Landscape, funded by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, that showed that the kettles is actually capable of supporting a small lynx population between 12 and 40 lynx, as long as there is a migration from BC once every 3 years. So that immigration is really important for maintaining the population's viability. Now, the one thing that distinguishes the kettle range from the Okanagan and the demographic support from BC is that in terms of kettle range recovery, we had a really strong and willing partner to take it to the next level. And that was the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation. Now, they have policy that guides their actions. In 2012, they adopted an integrated management plan that made it a priority for the tribe to support the recovery of threatened and endangered species, as well as other high priority species by, looking at the feasibility studies and then reestablishing populations throughout their historic range on the reservation, which is right here in the upper right, but also the north half, which was previously the reservation, as well as other Aboriginal territories where the habitat exists and it can be feasibly restored. Those Aboriginal territories shown here in the map in the center. And the tribes, they're not newcomers to this. They have a ton of expertise. They've successfully restored bighorn, sharp-tailed grouse, pronghorn, and they manage multiple wolf packs. And Rose Piccinini was established as the project lead, and she went about raising the money, pulling a core team together, coordinating with the Okanagan Nation Alliance north of the border and the BC ministries on permits, things like BC population assessments so that we knew where there were good sources that we could draw from, completing a translocation proposal and a monitoring plan as part of the permitting, figuring out source areas, release sites, getting a trapper coordinator to make connections within the trapper community and to kind of coordinate trapper logistics, getting collars so that we can keep track of these animals and other equipment, training staff, a whole bunch of stuff to get ready to go. And that resulted in this proposal or this action, restoring lynx to their native lands in north central Washington, which at this point is a population augmentation because research from Washington State University had identified that there were lynx currently on the ground and they had not been fully extirpated. So we were really augmenting or translocating. The project overview here sets some goals of establishing a sustainable population. That's one of the big objectives. It's a 5-year project. We'll do trapping in the winter, in fall in BC, and then we're going to monitor the cats year-round to keep track of them. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So here's the trap line setup. First, we had a meeting to find and meet trappers, figure out if they had interest, if they wanted to be involved. After some discussions, meeting with the tribal biologists, we had trappers with the Never Touch line and with the Aberdeen line agree to sign up And over here, you can see, here's the Kettle Range, here's Kelowna, and then these are the locations of the trap lines, about 40 miles outside of Kelowna. We set about to build these wooden box traps, about 50 of them, purchase about 20 of these steel traps, and set about laying them out on the trap line. So that involves doing things like carving out a space for the traps. We select locations based on landscape features, like off of a ridge line or a stream corridor that lynx might be following, or just where the trappers had previously had success. We had to be flexible, and if we weren't having any luck in one area, we might move the traps over to a place where we'd seen tracks, because that's a sure sign that there's a lynx around if you find tracks. And over here you can see wiring the door mechanism, or wiring, putting fishing line in to sort of set up the trap. They trigger a line in here, which goes to a mouse trap, which causes the door to come down. These have to be maintained so that they can persist through other animal intrusions or inclement weather. And then, of course, we want to set up a camera at each station so we have a good view of the trap site itself. We check these traps every single day, of course. We get up at dawn to run the lines. So our big objective is to minimize the amount of time that lynx are in captivity. 2 people are part of crews on each line. First thing, of course, we do is check for lynx. If there's no lynx, we have to run through the operation of the trap. We check to make sure all the lines are intact, that the mouse trap that's in this box is functional. It's dropping that door. We check the cameras for photographs. We sometimes have to release bycatch. We'll catch skunks and other critters, and that sometimes requires some creativity. You can see a lever fulcrum in action here to get this skunk out. We will rescent the traps every 3 to 5 days with lure. Rose is showing off here. We will, smear it on the end of a stick or sometimes on an animal hide. Again, stuff to make these traps attractive. We'll use CDs sometimes, and the wings of grouse and other birds that might cause the lynx to be really curious and take a step into the trap to see what's going on. So try to make these as curious and as interesting as possible. Now, we do get a lot of visitors and some bycatch. For instance, you see a little kitten down here. They sometimes are captured in the traps. The mothers will hang around. We'll let them go right away. It's usually pretty quick to get them back to their crew. Right here, you'll see a lynx that has a collar on. That indicates that some of the lynx, at least this one, came back from the kettles up to its natal area and returned back to check out a trap. In fact, we did catch 1 or 2 of these males and a second time. And then, yeah, sometimes bears come around to check things out. They're always incredibly delicate and gentle with the traps, moving them around because they're trying to figure out, what the scent is that they're smelling. And however, when we do catch a lynx, our priority is lynx safety and welfare. So, we want to mask up to keep the lynx safe from us. We stay quiet or speak in low tones. We put a cover over the trap just to keep it tranquil. We transfer the lynx from a trap into a crate, which we use for transportation. And then we use the snowmobiles or the ATVs or side-by-sides or pickup truck to move them down to a processing area. And then, of course, you have to let everybody know that you caught a lynx. You have to let the vet know and others so they can be ready. And reception can be a little scarce on the line. So you might have to try a few different things to get a contact. All right, so during processing, again, masks and gloves to protect the animals. We estimate the weight. We will administer an anesthesia, and then we move the animal to a ground cloth. Like I said, we measure the weight, we cover the eyes and put drops in. We do a physical exam, including of the teeth, to make sure their teeth and claws are in good shape. Their body condition is good. We track their temperature, pulse, and respiration, and capillary refill time so that we make sure they're doing well while they're out. We regulate their temperature. I'll have a picture of that in the next slide. Measure the neck and attach the collar. We take a sample of hair for DNA. We tag the ear. We photograph it. And then, of course, a vet comes to look at it, make sure we have a healthy lynx. These are just a few more slides of the processing. And then one of the cats that, after it recovered, we gave it something to eat. And you can tell it had a little bit of a mixed feelings about being hungry and being offered food, but also what the whole situation was. So you can see, here is the effort to prepare it for processing. You see the team working carefully here. And this is a place where the animal is getting a little bit warm, so we took some ice and put it in its underside to cool it off. Here you have a ear tag and a collar, and then of course a paw to make sure all the equipment's there that give this lynx a good chance of doing well on the ground. So our goal with captivity is to release the lynx within 24 hours. That's usually by noon the next day. We head down at the crack of dawn. Folks come up from Keller. We come down from Kelowna. We meet at the border. We do a handoff of the animals. Both after they've had a little something to eat in the morning, both the U.S. and the Canadian border have been highly supported and really helped to make the transfer as easy as possible. The release, though, is really where it all comes together. It's surprising me how emotional it is when the cat leaves its crate and with robust energy moves into their new home. It's just that it's sort of the place where it all comes together, all the meetings, the planning, the permitting, the travel, some of the hassles, all that stuff falls away when the lynx is bounding off into its new home. I don't know what these blue lines are, where they came from. I'm sorry about that. What I want to say here is that some of the releases are more formal events with elders like Shelley Boyd here, and dignitaries and press and participation, but quite a lot of them are really informal, just basically dropping off on the cat on the way after the shift ends. But each release is super important and super gratifying as a step towards a sustainable population in the kettle range. So now that the animals are on the ground, we start to do monitoring. And on the left here, you see like all the data points of all the cats. So we have questions like, are they still alive? Are they remaining in the recovery area? Are they establishing a home range? And then are they reproducing? Are they producing young? And we use a ton of different kinds of monitoring. We monitor on the ground, looking for tracks. If you can find a pair of big tracks and a pair of little tracks, that can tell you something about reproduction. We also use, remote cameras and telemetry, as well as the GPS collars to keep track of them and to try and answer some of those questions. For instance, when the tracking shows that the females are starting to localize, we'll go out and set up cameras, stations around that cluster in hopes of identifying a den site as well as evidence of reproduction. And just take a look at these data points for a while, just for a minute. I mean, you can see that, some animals are going out and checking out things, moving north of the border, looking at stuff up there, but the vast majority are staying in the recovery area, which is a good sign. I did want to pull out one amazing animal movement. And this is another objective of the project, is to identify those connectivity pathways between the kettle range population and those in the north. And this is impressive to me because there was no variation. There was no wandering off to the side. This animal seemed to know exactly where it was going, to go back over 100 miles to return to its natal site. So that's pretty impressive. And then again, these are just examples of cameras picking up images. This is kind of the stuff that we travel to in order to find good spots to put our cameras. This is good lynx habitat with all this down material. And I'd like to just give you an overview of how things are going, how we're doing. So here's year one. We captured 9 lynx over about a 4-month period. That was our first year out. Pretty happy about those sex ratios. We want more females than males. And our first year was a good effort. Our second year, we decided we wanted to make some changes and thought about initiating trapping a little earlier. We were concerned, though, about a few things. There were, bears had not yet gone into hibernation, and potentially might see some more bears. There might still be some younger kittens around. There's the risk of non-target species, just because the snow affects distribution. So without the snow, not only that, we wouldn't have tracks, and that can be really important for identifying places to go. And plus, there's a lot of food out, in the fall, in early winter. So we're kind of wondering if we would attract them or not. We have some new traps, and we also wanted to change the location where we're letting them go. So we had some changes that we did. How did it go? It went pretty good. We caught 10 cats in 2 months, so half the amount of time and more animals, acceptable sex ratios. But overall, our adjustments were yielding really good results. And so we carried that forward in year 3, which we're doing right now. We had, it's really a hot and cold year. On one line, we captured 5 cats in 8 days. And then on the other line, we only caught 2 males, and that we still haven't finished there. We did have to pull back because of those extreme weather conditions in January, which put us at risk for being out there when it's too cold, but also didn't want the cats to be in traps when it's the high is 18 below and things like that. So 2 more years to go, and but we're off to a really good start. More coming on this, but in summary, we've released 26 lynx. 2 of them returned to BC. As I mentioned earlier, we're recaptured and then released again in the kettles. We've had 3 mortalities. One that is undergoing a necropsy, one that had a parasite load that we're now treating lynx for parasites before they come down, and then a third that highlights the threats to lynx in BC. A female went back north and was captured in a legitimate trap. 2 animals dropped their collars. That's what they're designed to do over time, but we don't get any more collar data after that. 5 collars failed, so we don't have a signal. The collars have been a little bit of a disappointment. They're not living up to the expectations, shorter battery life and things like that than advertised. This is apparently a big problem with any kind of wildlife collars. So, but we do have 14 cats that are broadcasting. If they're still occurring where we recorded them last, there's 5 in BC, there's 8 on the north half, and there's 8 on the reservation. So things are going quite well. Now I'm going to take a minute and shift over to about a 10-minute video that oh, sorry, I should highlight, these are all the partners who are involved in the project, and some of them that are providing support as well. I swear I don't know where those marks came from. They were not there until just now. So I'm going to shift over to another video. So we took a lot of our cameras, the film from a lot of our cameras, and put them together into a video that I want to share with you. If I can. Why am I having trouble here? I'll close this one and this one. Let's see if I can get this one to open. There we go. Okay. And I'm going to stop it. I'll turn the sound on. All right. And then I'm going to share it with you here. All right. Sorry about the technical steps here, but I think we're ready. And I'd ask you to turn your sound on or make sure you can hear, because there's some interesting vocalizations. Now you can see these are a lot of activity around these sites with pileatids and jays. You can see some animals really like the bait that we put out there. You can see cats are curious and they'll like reach for stuff, and sometimes they trigger the trap. Some cat-like behavior, digging a little spot. And of course, the bunnies are what make this all work. And here we see that when the doors close, it doesn't do us any good. The cats are not afraid of these traps. Sometimes they seem a little annoyed that the door is closed. Certainly very curious. In that film, the female had just come by a little bit earlier. That was a male looking for her. Here we are resetting the traps. They're not, just because you have a lynx inside the trap doesn't mean that the door goes down. So you have to really be persistent. Now take a look here on the lower right side of this trap, right over here. Keep your eye right there. Boom, out the side. These links will show you where the weaknesses in your traps are. Here we have Rose and Donovan checking cameras. Oh yeah, one of our visitors taking a big chunk of bait with it as it leaves. Now, here's a martin. You think this martin is going to be able to get in through these cage sides? Apparently not a problem. We welcome all ages on the trap line. Indeed. Cats are very patient. They do not find it stressful, that we can tell in these cages, in these traps. That's what you want to see. Doesn't always happen. There's a martin that's got a little treat. That's Rich Whitney and myself. Rich is the wildlife division lead for the Colville tribes. Every day we got to check everything, make sure it's all working. Because you want it to work when we're not there. It's an ermine checking out the prey we have. Sorry, the bait we have. See the bear kind of trying to figure out where that interesting smell is coming from, but very gentle with the trap. We're just able to move that trap back into place and keep going. Sometimes they just don't feel quite comfortable. They're kind of curious. There you see some wings. It's one of the attractants. That one's got a collar on, so that was one of the males we recaptured. There's the kitten. The camera recorded before we arrived and let her out. And her mother is very nearby. Here we caught a skunk, and then a bear also was very curious about this very same trap. Now here's a technique that we all needed to learn. How do you let the skunk out without getting sprayed? And it's really become a rite of passage on the team. Everybody has to take their time. And Donovan Antoine here is demonstrating the proper technique as the professional that he is. Here we have our steel traps. Just work on a treadle. This was a new design that also had a treadle on the bottom. Here you're seeing the transfer from the trap into the travel container, into the travel crate. And it's a team effort, but it's successful and effective. Obviously not super comfortable. There's the kitten again. So we try to get up there as quick as we can to get the cats moving before too long. All right. That concludes my the material that I prepared for you today, and be very happy to entertain any questions that you might have for me. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you, Dave. That was, you see those setups out there sometimes, and it's great to just get a chance to see the wildlife camera footage. So everybody, if you are here, go ahead and unmute yourself and feel free to put your camera on. So maybe you said this, I had a couple of work things come in. But once you do have a lynx in a trap and it triggers the camera, like who's monitoring that and how long until you go to transfer the cat out of the cage? And
Yeah, it's a good question. So the cameras are there all the time, and they are motion triggered. So they'll capture everything, including when we come. We head out at the crack of dawn and we go check all the traps, and we will basically finish the line in the morning. And what that means is that we limit the amount of time that lynx are in the cages, in the traps, and then we try to get them processed and back down and then released again within 24 hours. So we want to really limit the amount of time that we have them in captivity. Yeah, Sue.
Sue has something in the chat here.
Yeah, I see that. You're
Says that
surprised
more
that
lynx don't return to their natal area.
Yep. And so, this was something that happened in Colorado where they did a reintroduction there and they put a lot of lynx on the ground and they left the recovery area right away. And I think there's two things going on there that are different. Number one is that, so we did fisher recovery work prior to lynx. And one of the lessons that we got was that when the animal comes out and it's released, it's really helpful if it recognizes that there are other lynx in the area. So the fact that there were lynx in the kettles and there are, markings and pathways and other things that lynx use to orient themselves, the fact that there were lynx there already, I think increased the likelihood that they stuck around. The other thing is that it just really shows that the kettles has great habitat. There's just a ton of food. They're able to sustain themselves. There's other lynx there. So they're finding the kettles to be an attractive place. I mentioned that some of the animals do move north. Others will move north and then they'll come back down again to the kettles. So they do move around. They do kind of check things out, but the fact that they're returning to kettles, I think is a good sign.
How much of Conservation Northwest is supported by governmental dollars versus, I'm sure you have to do a lot of fundraising and.
Yeah, we do. And we're really fortunate in that something like 75 or 80% of our budget is from individual donors. So that gives us a huge amount of latitude to manage the programs the way we think is best. And then the remainder comes from foundations and members and other support.
Wow. And how long have you been with Conservation Northwest?
I started in 94. So this is like my 30th year, believe it or not. I've had a number of different jobs at Conservation Northwest. And in the last, 6 or 8 years, my focus has been on wildlife recovery. So working on the fisher recovery and then now the lynx work. And we're really hopeful that within the next year or two, we'll be moving grizzly bears back into the North Cascades.
All right. Yeah, any other thoughts or questions out there? It's so quiet. Okay.
Thank you, Melanie.
Melanie, yeah.
I agree. I mean, besides hanging out with the youth of today, who are way more mature than I was when I was in my late teens and 20s, they're smarter, they're more worldly and more capable than my peers I remember being. But besides that, working in wildlife conservation and actually just really seeing how when you stop killing, provide good habitat, provide opportunities, there's a really strong will to live. And that's something that really comes through with this wildlife recovery work.
What have you seen in terms of some of the challenges or the opportunities on the Colville Reservation? Because, yeah, I'm just seeing a lot of times that the tribes are doing just some incredible work, not just the Colville, but like a lot of the restoration work is being spearheaded right there. So, any
It's
other work happening over there?
Yeah, I mean, there are um, many opportunities to work in partnership with the tribes we found, including uh, supporting other recovery work. So we were very much involved in the effort to move sharp-tailed grouse into that connectivity zone between the Okanagan and the Kettles. They have brought pronghorn back to the state. The Yakima Nation has also brought pronghorn back to the state. And we have a program, the Sageland Heritage Program, run by Jay Keeney and others, that are working to ensure there's really good habitat connectivity between those pronghorn that are in the areas around the Colville tribes lands and those that are in the Yakima tribes lands. The Colville aren't done yet. I mean, they are looking to restore burrowing owls, which were once much more widespread and common. They are very interested in jackrabbits. There's two different varieties in Washington that have been significantly impacted by the loss of shrub steppe habitat. And they're looking for effort. They're in the process right now of planning to recover those species as well. So they've got populations of wolves on the reservation. They've restored bighorn. So they are doing really remarkable work. And we should be really grateful to them for making the Northwest as wild as it was and can be.
Can I ask a quick question? Is there any movement to protect lynx in Canada, remove them from the possibility of being trapped for fur?
Thank you for that question. It's really tough. The trappers have an inordinate amount of political support. They have a very unusual arrangement where the trappers own their lines and they determine the level of harvest that they can do. The concept is that, they're going to want to ensure that they have a sustainable harvest, so they're not going to take too much. But there's no consideration of cumulative effects, like what happens if this trapper, and this trapper all want to take a whole bunch. And then on top of that, they are asked to report the level of harvest, but it's voluntary. So even those numbers I showed you are very are rough estimates. In about 2014, they did develop a lynx conservation strategy that would shift the way that permits for trapping were issued, and it got blown up politically. And then they updated it and tried again in a couple of years, and it's still just languishing. It's totally ready to go. It's completely written up. But they just isn't support in the communities for it. So to answer your question, I think we're a long way away from sort of modern wildlife management in British Columbia. The one thing that we have going for us is just that bobcats, driven by the fashion industry, are incredibly valuable. They want to line pockets of these fancy jackets with bobcat fur, and they have really unique markings on the inside of their leg, and that's what they want. And because of that, there's just less attention. I know I can't quite grok either, but there's much less attention and focus on capturing lynx, but it still remains a concern and a threat.
Thank you.
After living in the Met Health for a while now, like, what do you think is one of our most important ways to restore this habitat and ecosystem? Certainly, the loss of our riparian zone to all the alfalfa, and there's just been a lot of shifts and changes that, I think a lot of us don't see or realize, because this is what we've seen I've been here for, 25 years. And so,
And it happens
yeah, we
slowly over
don't see
time.
what we're lost. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think you're right. Development, the places that we like are the places that a lot of animals like. They're down by the water, they're in the flats. So there is direct competition between us and a lot of species. It's one of the reasons why you see that some of the wildlife areas that were purchased for the purpose of providing for mule deer have been, have closures on them for periods of time when the mule deer are most vulnerable, because all the most excellent habitat for mule deer has been developed and occupied by us. So I think that's a key one. The other thing I'm kind of keeping my eye on for those species that kind of live away from the cities, kind of in the higher country or in the backwoods, there's been, with this level of fire activity, and with concerns, very real and legitimate concerns about climate change and how that's going to make things drier and warmer, and then weird flooding events in the summer, has created a lot of political pressure to manage forests for fire alone. And what that does is it kind of puts one objective above all the others. There are species that, like fisher and marten, that need closed canopy, dense forests. So we don't want to be thinning everything everywhere all at once in the same way. And it's been a real challenge to get the Okanagan-Wenatchee National Forest to put wildlife on par and aquatics on par with legitimate forestry actions that can help shape the way fires behave. I actually think that the level of fires that we've had that show up on those maps kind of put us in a better position than a lot of parts of the Cascades, because modeling shows that you are going to have a big burst of fire activity. But then after those fire footprints are laid down, new fires are going to burn into the perimeter of those old fires. So what you get is an initial burst of these big fire footprints, followed by smaller and smaller fires over time, because they run into the places that burned already. So I think that I think the fire threat, the politics have been slow to catch up. And now they're here with all the money and all the active anxiety around fire. But I actually think that we're kind of past. That doesn't mean we're not going to have fires, but I think the big fires that we've seen, we're going to see fewer and fewer of those. So we need to be thinking more about the long term of how do we make sure that, yeah, we think about fire and management, but we also have these other values on par with them, like lynx, like fisher. There are other species that need open forest too, like white-headed woodpeckers. So we just need to be smart about how we move forward with these projects.
Can I
That's
ask what
great.
happened? Can I ask what happens when a Canadian trapper traps collared lynx? Did you say one had been trapped?
Yes,
Do they
sir.
not- Do they not have is there no code to let that lynx go if it's collared?
No, sadly, no. And they use snares a lot for wildlife capture. And so by the time the trapper, and that's just a metal device that they create a condition where the lynx kind of moves through an area that has one of these metal devices and just cinches around their neck. By the time the trapper shows up, the animal's dead. But they do have really great wildlife staff, the conservation officers and the trappers know them in their communities. And if they catch a lynx with a collar on it, they will contact that conservation officer. And that person knows what we're all about and will get the collar back to us. But there's not a step usually where the trapper could make a choice not to kill the animal, unfortunately. Getting that collar back is really important though. Like that, the track of that animal that went straight back, we were not getting that from the satellite. But when we got the collar back, we could download all of its locations, and that's how we got to see that pathway. So it's really important for us to get those collars back, even though we're bummed, obviously, when we lose an animal. we do get a lot of important data.
Okay.
Fantastic, Dave. Craig said, excellent work and presentation, Dave. Thanks for sharing. And Claire Ellen, thanks for the information and great videos. Yeah, that was wonderful to, just get a little view into a different world. And it is after 10, so just want to respect everyone's time. It's 10, oh no, not 10. We started at 10, 11:03. So anyway, thank you so much.
It's great to be here. I will say, if you enjoyed the presentation and you like the work that Conservation Northwest is doing, please join us. We offer memberships. We would love to have your support. And by becoming a member, you'll get more frequent updates and information about the projects that we're working on. So please join us. It's great to be here. Nice to see you all. And nice to see you too, Tracy. And
You too. Yeah, fantastic. So we just Google Conservation Northwest and there will be a button to sign up as a member and go
that's
like
right.
that, huh?
That's right. I can put it in the chat. Our website, and that is where you can find more information about C&W, our staff, our program areas, and the opportunity to join as a member.
Fantastic. Okay, one last call for questions. Anything we have missed here?
Actually,
All right.
I was just one quick question from me. I was just Googling about Lynx fur, and I just was shocked. Well, I'm shocked that people are still wearing fur, full stop, but I was shocked that they just use the abdominal fur. And they just discard or not use the rest of it. Yeah, I mean, that's just even more abominable. Yeah, awful.
It's true. Yeah. You got a ways to go on some things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. A couple more comments in the chat we don't want to miss. Connie says, great presentation and material. Thanks so much. Sue says, thanks for all the camera footage. I love to see all the animals. So glad they are out there. I will be joining. Thank you. I'm impressed. So yeah, fabulous. Thank you so much, everyone. I so appreciate your presence, your attention and interest. And yeah, let's go out and let's try to do a little bit more for our neighbors that live here in Okanagan County.
Could I ask a last question?
Sure.
So I'm active with the Washington Butterfly Association, and I think there's one of our members who has been out with your organization for the conservation of butterflies. Do you know if anything is being done for invertebrates or anything along those lines?
Well, yes and no. I mean, specifically, I mean, we've definitely been involved in like Taylor, checker spot, and Martin skipper conservation. That's over on the west side. And then the San Juan Islands has a unique species that we were involved in drawing attention to in terms of its conservation. And then I think the place that it's not directly related to insect recovery, but we do a ton of work towards, restoration after disturbances, restoring shrub steppe habitat, basically creating conditions where pollinators are going to thrive as well as other species. It's sort of, we try to take a macro picture, like we focus on these area sensitive species like wolverine, Canada lynx, fisher, gray wolf, with the notion that if you're providing habitat for these wide-ranging species, you're bringing along the whole suite of other species that live within their home ranges, within their geography. So I absolutely believe the critical importance of insects ecologically, and so we'll, like in our forestry work, it's all about protecting snags and dead wood as, places that are really crucial to microorganisms, not just insects, but mosses and mollusks and the whole suite of biodiversity that you find in those older forest conditions.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, there is so much interdependence in those kind of habitats.
That's right.
Okay, fantastic. I'll go ahead and stop the record button. Thanks to those who've watched us online too.